Warren Batty. The name alone conjures images of old Hollywood glamour, blockbuster films, and endless romantic conquests. But behind the carefully crafted image of the charming leading man lies a web of secrets, scandals, and shocking revelations that would make even the most hardened Hollywood insider gasp. From manipulating the military draft to devastating the lives of some of cinema's most beloved actresses, Batty's true story is far darker than anyone imagined. And what his ex-girlfriends finally revealed about him changes everything we thought we knew. Most people assume Warren Batty was born into Hollywood royalty, destined for stardom from birth. The truth is far more ordinary. He grew up in Virginia, the son of two school teachers, living a life about as far from the glitz of Los Angeles as you could get. While his sister Shirley MacLaine was busy performing and chasing her dreams, young Warren was the quiet kid, bookish type who preferred reading to the spotlight. That all changed when he transformed into a high school football star, discovering that physical presence and charisma could open doors his intellect alone never would. Watching his sister climb the ranks of Broadway and then Hollywood ignited something in him, a hunger that would define the rest of his life. He enrolled at Northwestern University, supposedly to get a proper education. But within months, he was bored, restless, and ready to quit. His parents were horrified, but they knew their son well enough to realize that trying to cage him would only make him more determined to break free. So at barely 20 years old, Warren Batty packed his bags and headed to New York City to study under legendary acting coach Stella Adler, with nothing but ambition and a growing reputation for getting exactly what he wanted. But ambition wasn't the only thing driving the young actor. Batty was developing another reputation entirely, one that would follow him for decades. He claimed he was a late bloomer, losing his virginity at 20, but what happened after that would become the stuff of Hollywood legend. He wasn't just interested in acting, he was interested in conquest. Through sheer determination and a bit of luck, he landed a supporting role on Broadway that somehow earned him a Tony nomination. At just 22 years old, he was being courted by Hollywood studios for screen tests. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Too perfectly. And then, the Vietnam War started ramping up, threatening to derail everything he'd worked for. Most young men his age were terrified of being drafted and sent overseas. Batty had a different kind of fear. He was terrified of losing his shot at stardom, so he came up with a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. In February 1960, he voluntarily joined the California Air National Guard. On the surface, it looked like patriotic duty. In reality, it was calculated manipulation. Just 1 year later, he managed to get himself dishonorably discharged, making him completely ineligible for military service. The details of how he accomplished this remain murky to this day, but the result was exactly what he wanted. He was free to pursue Hollywood without the threat of war hanging over his head, and he didn't care what anyone thought about how he'd done it. With his military problem solved, Batty set his sights on his next conquest, Joan Collins. She was 4 years older, already established in Hollywood, and stunning. He spotted her at parties and made his move, calling her up for a date like it was the most natural thing in the world. Their romance was immediate and intense, the kind of passion that burns white-hot from the start. But Joan quickly discovered she'd gotten herself into something she hadn't bargained for. Years later, in her memoir, she described trying to keep up with Batty's tireless bedroom demands, admitting that she was completely overwhelmed by his appetites. But the physical intensity was only the beginning of her problems. What she didn't know yet was that Warren Batty's attention span for any one woman was about as long as a commercial break, and his next co-star was about to become his next obsession, whether she wanted it or not. Natalie Wood was everything Joan Collins wasn't. She'd been a child star trying to transition into serious adult roles, recently married, and desperate for the film that would prove she was more than just a pretty face from her childhood. When she was cast opposite Batty in Splendor in the Grass, neither of them could have predicted what would happen next. Director Elia Kazan knew the success of the film depended on their chemistry, so he pushed them relentlessly, forcing them into embrace after embrace while their respective partners watched from the sidelines. It didn't take long before the gossip columns were running wild, with stories about how Batty and Wood were rehearsing their love scenes way too intensely and way far from the set. When Collins heard the rumors, she rushed back from Europe and confronted him. They had a massive argument that ended with Batty proposing, sliding a ring on her finger as if that would fix everything. She went back to Europe satisfied that she'd put an end to whatever was happening. She was wrong. The affair continued, and Batty had found a pattern that would define his entire career. Seduce the co-star, destroy the relationship, move on to the next project. His next film paired him with Vivien Leigh, and immediately the tabloids started speculating about another affair. But that was just a smokescreen for the real relationship he was having with young actress Susan Strasberg. Meanwhile, Natalie Wood's marriage to Robert Wagner was falling apart, and everyone in Hollywood knew exactly why that was happening. Wagner and Wood announced their separation, and almost simultaneously, Joan Collins finally kicked Beatty out of their apartment for good. Without missing a beat, he moved straight into Natalie Wood's rented mansion, and they started playing house like nothing had happened. The press tour for Splendor in the Grass should have been Beatty's moment of triumph, his arrival as a major star. Instead, it became a nightmare. He hated talking about himself, hated the scrutiny, hated every question about his personal life. He was terrible at interviews, giving short, dismissive answers that frustrated journalists and made him seem arrogant. The attention on their relationship with Wood was suffocating him, and he was starting to crack under the pressure. Then one night while they were out with friends, Warren Batty simply vanished. He didn't tell Natalie where he was going, he didn't call, he just disappeared for an entire week, leaving her frantic and humiliated. When he finally showed up on her doorstep a week later, acting like nothing had happened, she'd had enough. Natalie Wood dumped him on the spot, and Beatty's career immediately went into a tailspin. Film after film flopped, critics savaged his performances, and for the first time in his life, his charm wasn't enough to save him. He was adrift, desperate for something to reignite his career. That's when French director François Truffaut handed him a script about a notorious pair of criminals, and everything changed.
The script was Bonnie and Clyde, and Beatty didn't just want to star in it, he wanted to produce it, to have complete control over every aspect of the production. It was an audacious move for a 29-year-old actor whose recent films had bombed, but Beatty had never lacked confidence. He took the script straight to Jack Warner, one of the most powerful men in old Hollywood, and proceeded to get down on his hands and knees to kiss Warner's shoes, begging for the chance to make the film. Warner told him to stop embarrassing himself and gave him the green light, probably just to get the desperate young actor out of his office. Beatty assembled a small budget and a talented cast, and for once in his life, he showed restraint. He and his co-star Faye Dunaway made a pact not to get involved with each other for the sake of the film. Shockingly, he actually kept that promise. Maybe he was finally growing up. Maybe he was just too focused on proving himself as a producer. Either way, despite Jack Warner's active attempts to bury the film after he decided he hated it, Bonnie and Clyde became a massive hit and saved Beatty's career. And with that success under his belt, he immediately went back to his old ways, setting his sights on actress Julie Christie. Christie was different from his previous conquests. She was strong-willed, outspoken, and stubborn enough to match him. Their relationship lasted longer than most, partly because they had an understanding that Beatty had never bothered with before, an open relationship. It gave him the freedom to indulge his wandering eye without the guilt or the angry confrontations. But even that arrangement couldn't save them forever. Christie was naturally monogamous and introverted, happiest with a quiet life away from the spotlight. Beatty was the opposite, thriving on attention and new conquests. When they finally broke up, there was an awkward complication. They'd already committed to starring together in Shampoo, the film Beatty had been developing for years. So they had to put their personal feelings aside and work together, manufacturing chemistry for the cameras, while their real connection crumbled behind the scenes. And during that production, Beatty's behavior reached new lows. He made a pass at 17-year-old Carrie Fisher despite their age difference, making her one of the very few women to reject the notorious playboy. He cast both his ex-girlfriend and his current girlfriend in the same film to play his character's lovers, forcing them to work together in the most uncomfortable situation imaginable. The cruelty was casual, almost thoughtless, as if the feelings of the women around him were just minor inconveniences. The list of women who passed through Beatty's life during the 70s and 80s reads like a who's who of Hollywood and the modeling world. Michelle Phillips, Diane Keaton, Stephanie Seymour, Janice Dickinson, Daryl Hannah, Madonna. Each relationship followed the same pattern: intense passion, promises of marriage and commitment, then the inevitable fade as his attention shifted to the next project, the next co-star, the next conquest. Diane Keaton worked with him on Reds, his passion project about far-left journalist Ron Reed, which won him his only Academy Award for Best Director in 1981. He was so demanding on set that he once forced 80 takes of a single scene, pushing the actress to her breaking point until she finally snapped at him. The entire crew applauded her outburst. During filming in Spain, Beatty lectured the Spanish extras about workers' rights and the importance of fair wages so passionately that they actually walked off the set and refused to return until he agreed to pay them more money. He did, recognizing the irony, even if he didn't particularly care. Through it all, the same question haunted everyone who knew him. Would Warren Batty ever settle down? Or was he fundamentally incapable of committing to just one person? Then, in 1991, something impossible happened. Batty was casting for his gangster biopic Bugsy when actress Annette Bening walked in to audition for the role of Virginia Hill. He watched her performance and immediately called director Levinson with a declaration that shocked them both. "She's terrific. I love her. I'm going to marry her." Levinson, who knew Batty's reputation better than anyone, laughed it off as typical enthusiasm. But for once, Warren Batty was telling the truth. In 1992, after decades of affairs, broken promises, and shattered hearts, he actually married Annette Bening. They had 4 children together, and he essentially disappeared from the spotlight for years to help raise them. They're still married today, more than 30 years later, having weathered challenges that would have destroyed lesser relationships. When their eldest child, Stephen Ira, came out as transgender in 2006, Batty publicly called him a revolutionary, a genius, and my hero, as are all my children. It was a side of Warren Batty the public had never seen before. Vulnerable, supportive, genuinely committed. But the past never stays buried in Hollywood. The stories kept emerging, each one darker than the last. Years after her abortion, Joan Collins finally revealed in her memoir that she'd been pregnant with Batty's child during their relationship. Terrified of scandal and career destruction, she terminated the pregnancy and walked away, never looking back. It was a secret she'd carried for decades, the price she'd paid for getting involved with Hollywood's most notorious playboy. Then there was Natalie Wood, whose life had been so thoroughly derailed by their affair. When Batty was casting for Bonnie and Clyde, he approached her to star as Bonnie. She broke down crying, telling him she couldn't bear the thought of appearing in any film with him, let alone a romantic lead. That night, devastated and broken, she tried to take her own life. She didn't act again for 3 years, and that conversation was the last they ever had before her tragic death by drowning in 1981. The weight of that knowledge, the realization that his actions had pushed someone to such desperation, should have haunted him. Whether it actually did remains a mystery because Warren Batty has never been one to talk about his feelings or his regrets. And then there's one final eerie footnote to his story. Warren Batty was one of the last people to see Marilyn Monroe. At 25 years old, he met the legendary actress at a party at a producer's home. According to Batty in a 2016 interview, they spent the evening together, with him playing piano for her and the two of them taking a moonlit walk along the shore. He described it as more soulful than romantic, a rare moment of connection without conquest. Marilyn died the next day. Whether their encounter had any bearing on what happened remains unknown, but it adds yet another layer to the complex, troubling legacy of Warren Batty. So, what do we make of Warren Batty now? He's a man who manipulated the military to avoid service, who left a trail of broken hearts and damaged lives across Hollywood, who pushed women to their breaking points and then simply moved on to the next conquest. He's an Oscar-winning director, a father who publicly supported his transgender son, and a man who somehow managed to change his ways and maintain a marriage for over 30 decades. The contradictions are impossible to reconcile. Maybe that's the point. Warren Batty isn't a simple story of villainy or redemption. He's a reminder that people are capable of tremendous harm and unexpected growth, and that the price of someone's transformation is often paid by those who came before. The women who loved him paid that price, and their stories deserve to be told just as loudly as his triumphs.